All right, guys, welcome back. And today we're looking at Key Knowledge 3 of this second outcome of Unit 2 Marketing. And today we're looking at market research practices. Okay, so here is the study design. And there highlighted is what we're looking at. So market research practices such as data collection techniques, analysis and interpretation. So this is not the first time that we've mentioned market research. We mentioned that right at the beginning of the course, and we're looking at some of the processes you need to do in the lead up to starting a business. I guess what we're doing here is delving a little bit deeper and looking in a little bit more detail at what some of those processes might actually involve. So what is this one all about? Basically, before you start selling a product or a service, basically you want to know if it's something that consumers are going to want to buy, clearly, because if not, then you probably don't want to be trying to sell it. So the way you find this out is to carry out some market research. And there's a definition for you there in red. The action of gathering information about consumer needs and preferences. So the idea here is what you're going to do is try and find out about what consumers need, what consumers want, and also about their attitudes and their expectations towards and of businesses in general, basically to reduce the risk of you making some poor decisions right up front. And look, you also, this is a process you go through the life of the business as well, but we're talking about this in the context of the early stages here, before you even kind of get into things. So it can help you identify some new business opportunities. It can give you some information about how your products compare with those that are being offered by your competitors, and ultimately provide really good information about what the future direction of your business should be. Now, there is a process that you can kind of go through, a kind of standardized process, I guess, that you might need to explain. And again, this can be applied anytime through the life of the business, right from the initial idea and right through the life of the business as well. So the 3 steps. First off, define the objective. And the objective might be as simple as, is there actually any demand for what you're intending to sell? Step 2 is collecting the data. So you've got to work out what type of data, what type of information it is you're going to need, and then design ways to actually go out there and collect it. And then the 3rd step is to actually analyze and interpret that data. What is that data that you've got now telling you? What conclusions can you draw from all of that data that you've collected? A little on the importance of market research. Again, another thing that can crop up in questions. Can ask you about, to explain the importance of going through this process. First off, it reduces the level of risk or uncertainty attached to the introduction of new products and services. So if you've gone through this process, you're going to have some information that hopefully tells you that there actually is some demand out there and that people might actually buy it. If you go into it completely blind without having done this process, you're not going to know until you start selling. And there's obviously more risk attached to that. It can also provide some information on your current offerings. It can provide some information on what kind of adverts you need to be making. It can provide information on what your packaging maybe should look like, and whether or not any changes need to be made to all this sort of stuff. And thirdly, it allows you to make better predictions about trends in the marketplace. Remember, we've talked before about the importance of businesses to kind of stay on trend so that your business does not become irrelevant and people kind of lose interest in what you're selling and then stop buying. So there's 3 kind of key reasons that it's really important to go through this process. Now, just go back to the study design here. It says practices such as data collection techniques and then analysis and interpretation. So let's just look at that now. So finishing off the key knowledge dot point, basically. So data collection techniques, first off. So what kind of information is it that you're going to need? 2 types, primary data and secondary data. So, and this is similar if you've done humanities, this is a similar idea here. So primary data, information that's being collected for the first time, and secondary data, you're going to be looking through information that's already been collected, probably for another purpose, but it might be useful to you. And then there's also two types, qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative data is your descriptive, your non-numerical stuff, and your quantitative is any information that can actually be presented numerically. And then you can convert that into graphs and charts and that sort of thing. So probably you're going to be looking at a mix of both primary and secondary, and also both qualitative and quantitative. Okay. So what kind of data collection methods can you use? Very simply, first one would be a survey. This could give you either qualitative or quantitative data. You can ask a series of questions, and they could be closed questions or open-ended questions, and lots of different ways to do this. Online is a pretty popular way to do this these days. Very often now, when you buy a product, particularly if it's something a bit more expensive, once you have made that purchase, within a day or two, you'll often get an email from the business and it'll ask you about your impression of your dealings with that business, and they'll collect that from as many customers as want to give it to them, and they can use that to inform them about any changes they might need to make to their processes, to their customer service, that sort of thing. In person, doesn't happen as much as it used to. It used to happen in shopping centres. You'd have people walking around with clipboards and they try and stop people and ask them questions. You don't see that as much these days. I guess online has kind of taken over from that. Telephone, you get these telephone calls. I still get them. I tend not to answer them, but people trying to collect information by phone and by mail. So I'd say that realistically, online is probably the big one these days, but you do have different options depending on how you want to go. A focus group, small group of people who reflect the target market of what it is you're trying to sell. And generally what you do is collect qualitative data, collect through discussions and feedback being provided. So things like taste tests. I remember actually as a kid, my mum must have signed me up for some stuff. So I remember I was only really quite small, but being involved in these focus groups, they might have like 10 kids in a room and they'd give us some food to try and we'd have to tell them if we liked it, that sort of thing. So those, I didn't realise at the time they were focus groups, but that's clearly what they were. A really good way to get first-hand feedback from the people or the type of people that you're trying to sell to. And thirdly, observation, just observing customer behaviours during the purchasing process. Now, when I say observation, it doesn't actually necessarily mean standing there and watching, but store loyalty cards. Is a way that businesses do this these days. So collecting information on our purchase history. So every time that I go to Woolies, I use my little orange loyalty card, rewards card. And when you do that, it's actually logging everything that you have purchased in that shop. So, I've been using my card for years and years and years. They have a record of absolutely everything that I've ever bought in their store. Really, really useful marketing information. And we'll talk about that a bit more later on in the outcome as well. Secondary data collection methods. Internet searches is the big one these days. Again, qualitative or quantitative information you can get here. Research the net to find information on your competitors or your markets, the industry. Some of this information is free, and some of it, when you click on, you'll be taken through and you actually need to pay for it. So you might use a mix of both of those. And then government agencies have a lot of information. The ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, lots of information is collected by the government and it's all available via their websites. And this would be probably more in terms of markets, potentially even markets in other states. So if you're looking at maybe expanding or selling across state borders, it can maybe give you some information on the market for that particular type of product in alternative states. Now, the second part of this was data analysis and interpretation. So basically, once you've collected all this information, and that could be a pretty extensive process, it might take you some time. So you've got all of your primary and your secondary data, you've got your qualitative and your quantitative data. You now need to use that information to kind of to provide something meaningful and something useful that you can use to make decisions about your business. So it's kind of, you've got all this stuff now, let's kind of work through it and get out of it something that's actually meaningful and useful. You might import some data into software such as Excel and produce some charts and some graphs, which can kind of produce a good overview and useful picture of some of that collected data. Or you might produce some reports summarizing some of that qualitative information that you've collected. So again, it depends on the information that you've got and what you're trying to get out of it, but process you kind of need to go through. And that is all there is to market research practices, guys. So I will see you in the next video when we're talking about Key Knowledge 4. Cheers for now.